Imagine waking up one morning and everything goes dark, not gradually, suddenly. You can't see your hands, you can't see your family's faces, you can't see anything. Now imagine that this happened in 1850, with no hospitals nearby, no surgery options, no guide dogs, no government support, just blindness. Forever. Losing your sight in the 1800s wasn't just a physical tragedy, it was a social death sentence. And today we're going to explore the reality that blind people faced, a reality most of us have never considered. Blindness in the 1800s came from many causes: industrial accidents in factories, chemical explosions, infections that spread unchecked, diseases like trachoma, syphilis, and diabetic complications. And often, simple accidents: a fall, a horse kick, a blow to the head. But here's the shocking part. Medical science in the 1800s had almost no solutions. There were no antibiotics to fight infections, no surgical techniques to repair retinas, no way to treat glaucoma or cataracts effectively. When a blind person arrived at a doctor's office, they were often told the same thing: "There's nothing I can do." That was it. No hope, no treatment, just acceptance. So what happened next? Most blind people lost everything: their jobs, their independence, their dignity. In the 1800s, there was no disability insurance, no social security, no accommodations in the workplace. If you went blind, you couldn't work as a factory labourer, a farmer, a carpenter, or a clerk. These were the jobs that paid money and kept families alive. Blind people were considered unemployable, so blind people had only a few options. Some begged on the streets. Some were placed in poorhouses or almshouses. Others became completely dependent on their families, with no income and no independence. Navigating the physical world was a nightmare without vision. Streets had no sidewalks. Carriages and horses moved unpredictably. Open sewers ran down the middle of roads. A blind person could easily be hit, robbed, or lost. Family members often became caregivers out of necessity, not choice. A blind person needed help with everything: getting dressed, bathing, eating, finding the bathroom, moving through the house without injury. Reading and writing were completely impossible for most blind people. There were no audiobooks, no braille machines. The braille system existed, but it was rare, expensive, and required education that most blind people couldn't access. Social attitudes were brutal. Blind people were often seen as burdens or tragedies. Children were told to avoid them. They were excluded from social gatherings. Many were institutionalized because society didn't know what else to do with them. Yet some blind people found ways to survive. A small number learned trades that didn't require vision: basket weaving, rope making, music. These were often the only jobs available to them. Music was actually one of the most viable paths for a blind person in the 1800s. A blind musician could perform in churches, concert halls, and homes. It was respectable work, and it paid. Education became a turning point. In the early 1800s, the first schools for the blind were established in France and then spread to other countries. This changed everything. The Massachusetts School for the Blind opened in Boston in 1832. In Britain, the Royal National Institute for the Blind was established in 1868. These institutions taught Braille, practical skills, and trades. But even education had a dark side. Many schools were segregated, crowded, and focused on preparing blind people for low-wage labour. Freedom was limited. Independence was discouraged. As the 1800s progressed, technology began to offer small improvements. The first guide dog for the blind appeared in Germany in the late 1800s. Gas lamps and later electric lights made streets slightly safer. By the end of the 1800s, the first cane for the blind was developed. A long white cane became a symbol, not of shame, but of independence. A blind person could navigate the world without a guide. But even with these innovations, blindness in the 1800s remained a life-altering catastrophe. A blind person's world had shrunk dramatically. Choice was gone. Opportunity was gone. Freedom was severely limited. The psychological impact was severe. Depression was common. Suicide rates among the newly blind were shocking. Losing sight wasn't just losing vision. It was losing identity, purpose, and hope. There were survivors, though. People who adapted, who learned new skills, who refused to disappear. One remarkable example was Helen Keller, who became blind and deaf as a child in 1882. Keller's story showed that blindness didn't have to mean the end of a life. With education, determination, and support, a blind person could learn, achieve, and contribute to society. But her success was extraordinary, not typical. For the average blind person in the 1800s, life was a constant struggle for survival and dignity. Every day was a battle against a world not designed for them, in a society that wanted to forget them. They couldn't work most jobs. They couldn't read. They couldn't navigate safely. They couldn't participate fully in social life. They were trapped in a prison of darkness, not just physical, but social. It wasn't until the 20th century that things began to change significantly. Better medicine, labour laws, disability rights, government support, technology. These developments transformed what it meant to be blind. Today, a person who goes blind can access education, employment, independence, and support systems that would have been unimaginable in the 1800s. But back then, blindness was a tragedy with no solutions. So when you ask, what happened when someone went blind in the 1800s? The answer is heartbreaking. They suffered, they struggled, and most were forgotten by a society that had no place for them. But their story reminds us of something important. We live in a time of unprecedented accessibility and possibility, and that's something worth appreciating. The next time you see someone navigating the world with a cane or a guide dog, remember this. That person has freedoms and opportunities that their ancestors could only dream of, and that's a remarkable change. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this exploration of history's forgotten stories, please subscribe, because next time we might just answer the question you've always wondered about but never researched.